All right, welcome back into the Illini Inquirer podcast. We're doing something fun, a little different today. Just want to catch up with my guy, Mike Carpenter. You hear him on the 200 Level podcast. You remember him from ESPN 93.5, all of that. Most of you guys are following him on Twitter as well, at Fanboy Carp. Carp, how are you, buddy? Good to talk with you. It's been a while, man.
It has been a while. I think maybe sometime during basketball season or right before football. But yeah, it's summer break for me. So I'm chilling out and still basking in the glow of Illinois basketball getting over the hump. And not just that, but seemingly having turned a new leaf in terms of we're in full reload mode. You know, where every offseason, each passing offseason, I'm less and less concerned that Brad Underwood's going to be able to accrue talent. And then I'm at that point where ho-hum, Will Riley's in town, 5-star. You know, I'm not surprised by any of that anymore. So it's a really good spot to be in.
Yeah. Okay. So take me in. What's it like, teacher in the summer, doing the podcast? What's this time of year like for you?
A welcome reprieve, I think. And, you know, it's kind of funny. I can hold a few different hobbies or interests and then my job included in that at the same time. But usually over football and basketball season, music will take a back seat because I'm focused on the podcast. And then I also started writing again with the Substack. So I find that when it comes to outside of my job, I can usually laser focus on one thing. And it just so happened that football, for some wrong reasons, was very emotionally exhausting. And then basketball was emotionally exhausting for all the right reasons. And this is that kind of time of year, especially as you get into May and you're fully decompressed. And now that a roster is seemingly complete where, you know, this is my off season, so to speak. So I've spent the last week just kind of getting into the summer break routine, getting back to like not having to wake up at 5:50 every morning, just little things like that. And it's a nice kind of refresher. But yeah, it can't be difficult during, let's say, October, November, or February, March to do much more than just focus on whatever's happening on the football field or the basketball court.
See, you now wake up later. I wake up earlier because my son's up at like 5:30 when the sun comes up.
Mm-hmm.
When usually he's trying to sleep until like 7 before he's got to go to school. But yeah, like this is a fun time of year. But I want to catch up with you about. We were both radio guys. I think we grew up on the Score. What is podcasting like for you? Like, what do you enjoy about it compared to radio? What do you miss about radio? Like that part of it.
I hopped on with Lon and Derek, I want to say a year and a half ago, something like that. And it struck me how I felt like the conversation was over before it started. There's something good about editing. There's something good about not being too long-winded. And what podcasting does is it allows people like myself to be long-winded. That's not always good. But what I do like about it is the sort of stream of consciousness thing that you can do on radio, but you also got to hit your marks.
Yeah.
I do like guardrails sometimes, but I also find that with Illinois sports, which is something that, you know, I have the history with throughout my entire life, that it is nice to kind of be able to tangentially go from one topic to the other without feeling like I need to hit a certain mark or like I got an ad break coming up or anything like that. So what I most appreciate about podcasting is the ability to basically just, you know, now that I'm doing the YouTube component and talking into my phone as well, it is, you know, this might sound hyperbolic, a bit of like personal therapy in a sports sense, because one, it is being shared with the people that listen to me that are also Illini fans. So I think there's a lot of shared emotions and perspectives. But also whether things are going well or they aren't going well, there'll be times where I don't necessarily want to podcast because the game the night before really ticked me off. But then when I do it, it's a load off. So for me, it's probably different than you in that it is a bit of catharsis.
Yes, that is the word I was about to say. I think
Yeah.
you just used that word the entire time I've known you.
Mm-hmm.
I think for you, it's an outlet to connect with other fans about being, you know, cathartic about like, hey, let's share this out. It's therapy session. Get it out, whatever it is, whether it's joy or when we were covering Illinois at ESPN radio, it was a lot of terribleness, right? So I think that's always been, for me, it's always like this is a way to talk about it and analyze it. People come to us for that, I think, for the most part. But I think people go to you just because you serve a different feature, I think. And that's about, you got analysis and you can break it down, but it's just about how do you feel about this and how should we feel about this?
Yeah. And in February and March, and let's actually start, March 1st. I can say in my long experience as an Illini basketball fan, I don't think there was a single month that was as fun as that one. And I know how it ended against UConn, but to be able to, through podcasting, react during each of those games, because starting with, I think it was March 1st was at Wisconsin. And that was the start of the month. And I know it ended terribly with one game, but every game after that was a win. And being able to see just kind of the momentum grow in terms of, the people that were tuning in on YouTube and actually listening as me or Isaac or my buddy Kenton were reacting to this in real time. It was something that we would not have been able to do back on the radio station. It was something that when I was a younger fan, the concept of that didn't even exist. You had to go to a sports bar or something in order to essentially do the same thing that I was able to do in my garage.
Yes.
With just whoever decided to tune in. So yeah, we found, I think, a good balance between the sort of midweek podcast where I have my thoughts collected and I can kind of much more, I would say, carefully go over whatever I'd watched the weekend or the night before. But there is that instant reaction during the second half. So that part of it's really grown. And you mentioned the catharsis part, and I have used that word a lot. But nothing beats joy. I mean, I promise you that, and you could sense this, I'm sure, traveling to Omaha and then Boston. The joy of this fan base when things are going good, it is intoxicating. It really is. And it's the kind of thing that, you wake up, you get an extra bounce in your step because you got a really freaking good basketball program. And they're nationally relevant, and they're making a deep run in the tournament for the first time since 05. Like, all of that was just, back to that word, intoxicating. I'll take that over cathartic. And it's been really cool to kind of share that through a medium that, again, 5 years ago, I guess I would have started the podcast 5 years ago. So yeah, that's how long it's been.
Yeah, and what I find fun about the podcast is you can actually talk about topics like when you want to talk about them, when you feel compelled to talk about them. A daily radio show, and this is what's hard, and it's what I give all these daily radio show hosts credit for, is because I've had to do it for almost a decade. Is you got to have takes on everything. Like you got to have thoughts on everything that is happening. Like, but if I don't want to talk about the White Sox right now or the Cardinals right now, I don't have to do that. Or if I don't want to talk about like the topic of the day of Illinois that I just don't feel like is that big of a deal, like I don't have to really dive too much into that. But the one thing I do miss, Carp, is like I missed the daily radio show during the Bears off season this year. Like that would have been a lot of fun for me. So I miss it then, but no, I like that. Like you can actually dive deep into something and hit on it all and not repeat yourself a lot. You can just have that one podcast and then go with it. But I agree with you of the way you connect with people, even on the YouTube, like we're doing right now. The post games that we do, like seeing all these fans, just, thousands on our live YouTube. Like it's awesome to see. Like we have seen that fan base engaged, even if it's football disappointment, and that they've come so close, and we'll dive into that, or this basketball run. You've seen this fan base just engaged in the right ways over the last couple of years.
I recall throughout the entire month of March, even after that Iowa State game, which I think Eastern time, did it end at like 12:30 out there in Boston?
Yeah, it was insane.
So you guys are on the air at, I don't know, 1:30 Eastern. It's 12:30 Central, and I'm on my second cigar and my fourth whiskey of the night, whatever, cleaning up the garage, and I'm watching you and you and Derek on the on my garage TV out there. And in those moments, what's really cool about it is, there's an insatiable desire to consume as much media as possible. And I'm one of them too. So there have been multiple times where after a big win, I remember last season after beating UCLA in Vegas, and I'm visiting family up in Michigan, and I'm going to bed to the soothing sounds of Jeremy Werner and Derek Piper's post-game show, because it's just, in those moments, there's been a lot of them, fortunately, with Illinois basketball in the last few years. In those moments, you want to either keep reliving it or you want to just ride that buzz out. And that's what things like this allow you to do.
You want to live in it and you want to share it, right? Yeah. Like those, I think these mediums really allow for that, which is really, really awesome. All right, let's talk about this past basketball season. Carp, where would you rank it? Where would you rank it in your Illini basketball fandom?
It's up there. I think from either conversations we've had or from just tweets. And I can go back to the game against Valparaiso, Roger Powell's team. And that was a Friday night in November, and we were trailing by 8 at halftime, I believe. We went on to win by 20 or something like that. But I felt coming into the season that we were essentially running it back. And you could be worse, but you could be better. I think striking out on a Ray J. Dennis was a major disappointment. I think that the additions they made were promising, but they all just seemed like pretty good role players, and that this is going to be all about Terrence and Coleman. And in many ways it was until the emergence of Damask. But to me, this is very far up there for a variety of reasons. One, because my expectations coming in were you're going to be a top half of the Big Ten for sure, an NCAA tournament team. You were more than that. Two, you finally slayed the dragon of not making the second weekend. And I think, and having talked with Trevor and Isaac about it too, and they're taking the fan approach of it as well, I think that Iowa State game was massive for this program and the vibes around it. Merely making it was great. And that was a high-level basketball game. If you lose it, there would have been more painful losses in my Illini fandom. But it was the way in which you won it and the way in which you had a signature moment, specifically Terrence's steal and dunk. Talk about cathartic.
Carp, I'm mostly an objective observer. Like a longer Illinois run helps my business. It's good for me, and I love covering the joy of all of it and everything that happens. But I gasped on that play. Like I was, oh my! Like I literally had to catch my breath on that play. It felt in that moment like that was the moment. That was the play. Like that is what I will remember almost more than anything of that entire season.
Yeah, and then Coleman, like kamikaze, jumping out of the it was that whole moment. We had the garage full of people, and I can say that, you know, short of making the Final Four in 05 when Arizona's last shot went off the front of the rim, that's probably the loudest I've ever exalted after any Illini moment. So okay, that's number two. You not only got past the hump, but you did so with style, and in such a way that somehow the 30-0 run against UConn's like, whatever. No big deal. I mean, it is a big deal, but they were very, very good. And
they were so much better than everybody in that tournament. Like once I knew you were getting like, you could have this thought, like you have the thought leading into the game. What if they slay the Giant like this? They could win a national championship. So you have to have that thought. And as like Marcus Damask hits that shot to tie the game 23-23, you're thinking, oh my gosh, if Terrence Shannon has a second half, they might actually have a chance to win this. And then you're reminded, oh, this is just a different level of team.
Yeah, 100%. I think the third one is the sense that I get in this offseason compared to last season. You know, Brad Underwood is 7 years into this, entering year 8. And I think, you know, no matter what your profession is, you just gradually figure things out. You get better each and every year. He's had to do this on the fly, with NIL becoming more and more of a thing. Each year he's adjusted the kind of roster that he wants to make. He learned the lesson with too many young guys 2 years ago. What did he move to? Fifth-year seniors. Now you're kind of seeing a balance between younger guys and older guys. And he's constructing a roster that I understand why a Bart Torvik isn't putting it high on the rankings yet. I understand why it's not maybe going to show up on Ken Pom on November 15th like it might January 15th. But the third and final reason why last year was such a big deal to me was it seems like it was in many ways a riding of the ship in a potentially long-term direction for this program. And that Brad Underwood, from the managerial to the managing personalities to just kind of being the CEO of the program, he's got it as figured out as any Big Ten coach, I think, right now. And, you know, as good as Purdue was last year, I do have questions as to whether or not Matt Painter can sustain this in NIL. I know that Mike Woodson accrued a lot of talent, but I got to see it. And I know there's the West Coast teams joining, but I do think there's going to be a transitional thing with UCLA and USC. I don't think they're going to come right in and go 16-4. So you have a unique opportunity. And I would have a very difficult time trading Brad Underwood at this moment for any other Big Ten coach. And I have not felt that way about an Illini basketball coach since Bill Self. It's a nice position to be in.
Yeah, because listen, I think Matt Painter's as good of an in-game coach, and I think he's going to get the most out of his roster. And I think even this year, like because there's no juggernaut returning in the Big Ten, I just don't see one. Like I think Indiana's insanely talented, but I just don't know if that roster is all fit together. I don't know if the coach can get the most out of them. I think they'll be very good. I think they'll be one of the best teams in the conference, but I just don't think they're that level of Kansas and some of the other powerhouses that we think are going to return to college basketball this year, like Alabama. But I do understand like what you're saying with Underwood of being able to put a roster together and get a lot out of it, and to get the pieces that fit, and to run an offense or a scheme that fits with what's happening, to have the assistant coaches, to have the NIL resources, all of those things might make him the most well-rounded of the coaches. So while like, I still feel like Painter's at a different level nationally than him at the moment because of his resume, I agree with you. I don't know if there's another coach I'd want at this moment.
And that each and every offseason, if you think about it, Underwood's had some fairly significant issues to address or holes to fill. And I feel like each and every year he's getting better at filling those needs. Orlando Antigua, I mean, on the list of things that have happened this offseason, because there's been so many, I think, overall good additions to this roster. It's not that we've forgotten that Orlando Antigua was back in the fold. But it just seems like every week or two, there's another big get. And in the transfer portal era, sometimes we're laser focused, understandably so, on the next guy that's going to sign. But I think we're seeing now even more dividends start to pay off with whether it be Kasparis Yakuchionis. Am I saying that right?
Yakuchionis?
I said it about 28 times on the last podcast because it's so fun to say, even though I might not be saying it correct. I don't know. Yeah. And I mean, again, I mentioned, Will Riley. We're just saying, like, shaking our head as if this is the norm now, but I do think it is. I think that you are in a position now, and we might talk about the new Illini era program and how that kind of folds into this too. But I've always thought that Illinois basketball, if they could just get to a certain level, that there is enough of a backing with big time donors and the overall fan base energy that you could get to a place and you could stay there with the right guy. Yeah. And that is where this feels a lot different than, say, Bruce Weber, who, when you didn't capitalize on the 05 Final Four with a really good recruiting class, and instead you brought in, no offense to Chester, but Chester Frazier, Jamar Smith, and I think Sean Pruitt, though maybe that was the year before, that didn't seem like it was going to sustain itself. You were just kind of riding that final wave of D and James for one more season and hoping that Weber would figure it out. Now you're getting on-court success matched with momentum off the court in a way that I haven't seen in a while. And then you factor in the money part of it. And I do think that we're in a good position with Illinois, that there will always be money, I think, for the basketball program. Football, I'm not sure. But if I'm a big donor, if I'm Shad Khan and Josh Whitman comes to me and says, there's this guy that will complete this basketball roster and put them as a national contender, I'm paying that money. And I think there's people that would be willing to do that.
How much is Carp handing out?
I mean, I'm not an icon. I'm not, it's funny because I think it would be a drop in the bucket, and I go to the games and I feel like in other ways I'm supporting, listen, if I got a call from someone at Icon and they, or the Alumni Association, I would listen. And someday I'll be taking over my parents' ticket account and all that. And that's great. But no, I think we have plenty of venture capitalists that are far more willing and capable than I am to spend money on it.
Carp, you're getting talent like in the basketball realm, but like, how are you kind of approaching these off seasons? You said it early on, like, is Underwood just gotten to the point where you're just like, yeah, he's going to figure it out. I'm not too concerned about it. Or how into it are you? Because I know there's a lot of fans that are on our site, listen to this podcast, live and breathe by every transfer recruitment. How do you kind of approach the off seasons now with how much turnover there actually is?
The same way that Underwood is learning year after year, I'm learning as a fan how to approach it. I made the mistake back in April of thinking, okay, we'll get Maddox and Boswell and AJ Storr and, whatever. Like, I had a starting five in my mind. We're going to get them, no problem. That's not how it works. Not even Brad Underwood is going to get every single guy, though I really think the hit rate is pretty remarkably high. I mean, if you think about it, Dante Maddox was someone that got in but didn't commit. AJ Storr, I don't think he ever even made it to campus, and it sounds like there's a whole bunch of things he might have been asking for. Fine. But for the most part, the guys they bring into campus, they keep. And I think what I've trained myself to do each passing year is just exercise a little more patience and understanding that it probably won't be until June 1st. Yep. They have a good idea what your roster is, because for starters, you are probably going to have guys testing the NBA waters each year. That's a really good position to be in, but that also means that you're going to have to wait on some of them. Partially the reason why you and Joey were talking about why they had to go get Benham Rickhouse and Kerry Booth, because they couldn't wait for Coleman. And those situations may present themselves later too. But I think the international market makes it even more intriguing. I love the inroads they built there. I think that in this day and age of college basketball, skill. Just get me skill, and you can work around it. You can build strength. You can gain experience with each game you play, but you cannot teach skill. You just can't. So
skill, yeah. Especially in size, like with that skill, like that is obviously what they want, is positional size mixed with guys who can shoot, pass, and think the game of basketball.
Yeah. And we only got tape to watch of these international guys, for example, and we are not seeing them against collegiate basketball players or Big Ten basketball players for that matter. So there's no guarantee that that's going to work. I mean, I know UCLA last year was an example of a team that added a couple, maybe 3 international players, and it didn't pan out. I think Nebraska ended up snatching one of those guys, and it's perfect fit for Fred Hoiberg. I think that makes perfect sense. But it is kind of fun. I say patience. That's one thing I'm exercising more of, and kind of trying to take a step back and just enjoy the process as much as one could. Because even with that uncertainty, what I've liked about this offseason is that each and every addition they've made has seemingly made sense from a fit standpoint. And you're kind of seeing a roster come together where everybody brings something different. But the one constant, you mentioned size, that's one of them. It's that sort of flexibility offensively, and I'm guessing defensively, though that might be a work in progress this year, but a lot of flexibility, a lot of moving parts where I could sit here and try to think of a starting 5. And in my mind, I have one. But come December 15th, when you're a month into the season, it might not be that at all. Yeah. And that's okay. And that you're giving yourself so many options with the players that you brought in.
Yeah, the way I kind of described it, Carp, is I wrote the other day, like, I feel like there's a top 6 roster in the Big Ten. I don't know whether that's finishing 2nd or 6th in the Big Ten or 7th, right? Like it could be something like that. And I don't know if it's going to go, 2 seed in the NCAA tournament or 9 seed in the NCAA tournament. But I feel like this roster, despite all its newness and youth relatively to what we saw last year, I feel like it's got a really high floor with an intriguing ceiling. But the most intriguing part of it to me might be that it's kind of a 2-year window outside of Rickhouse. It's like a 2-year thing. So what are your expectations going into the year with this roster and what it could be long-term?
Talk about patience. I think even within the season, trying to exercise that, because I mentioned the Valparaiso game last November and thinking, we've done it. We run it back and we're going to be fine, but we aren't going to be great. I think that there will be moments in November and December where after a game, we're a little bit shook as to what did we just watch? It looks really disjointed. Why is it not clicking? And the answer will be obvious, because there are like 8 new pieces, maybe 9 in a bit, depending on what happens with Will Riley or somebody else. That is not going to be a seamless process. But I am encouraged by this 2-year plan. If such a thing can exist in the transfer portal, it seems like they position themselves to at least try that. And I can envision a season where, let's say they finish top 4 in the Big Ten, and I'm pretty bullish on that, just because every other team is dealing with change. And the ones that you would look at as potentially more talented than Illinois, like in Indiana, still might have a hole or 2 on their roster that we'll see how that works out. So I still feel pretty bullish about top 4 and then in the Big Ten, even with the new additions. Obviously, NCAA tournament caliber. Of course, things can go wrong. You could be UCLA last year and just it doesn't click. But I trust this coaching staff enough to think that this year might be a kind of setting the table for next year. And if that means that they finish top 4 in the Big Ten and they get a win in the NCAA tournament, or maybe they make another run of the second weekend, to me, that's a successful year. I don't expect them or need them to get banners each and every season. But if I continue to feel kind of an upward trajectory and building towards something, I'm okay with that, because I went back and looked at the 80s with Lou Henson. That's a really good decade. I'll take that decade. Yeah. But there was a Sweet 16, an Elite 8, and a Final 4 in one decade. And that means that there's some years that it ends a little bit earlier. And that's something as a fan that I don't want last season to inform me to thinking, well, it's Final 4 or bust. That's not realistic. But I do think that we'll see enough things, hopefully this year, where it's like, okay, they're continuing to build. And more than anything, they kind of have a template for what they want to do going forward.
You feel that, guys? Warmer, sunnier days are calling. And fuel up for them with Factor's no prep, no mess meals. Meet your wellness goals in time for summer thanks to the menu of chef-crafted meals with options like Calorie Smart and Keto, or my favorite, Protein Plus. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, you'll always have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. Make today the day you kickstart a new healthy routine with Factor. What are you waiting for? With 35 different meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week, you'll always have new flavors to explore. So you can crush your wellness goals this May with dietitian approved meals and ingredients that you can trust. So treat yourself to restaurant quality meals that feature premium ingredients like filet mignon, shrimp, and blackened salmon. And the best part, you keep kitchen time to a minimum. Factor meals are ready in 2 minutes. No shopping, prepping, cooking, or cleaning up. So enjoy effortless support for your lifestyle. Choose from 6 menu preferences to help you manage calories, maximize protein intake, avoid meat, or simply eat well balanced. So head to factormeals.com/Illini50 and use code Illini50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% of your next month. That's code Illini50 at factormeals.com/Illini50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. Last one I want to ask you about basketball. It was such a obviously interesting season because of what happened in the middle of it. With Terrence Shannon, that's going to play out in this next week, right? We'll see if he gets drafted, where he gets drafted. I'm sure he'll get drafted, but where do you put the season as an individual season in Illinois history, given his dominance, especially late in the season and early in the season, and everything that happened in the middle of it? Because we have to find out what happens. Hopefully the truth comes out. But like the fact that he played that way, given what was hanging, it's still amazing to me that he could compartmentalize that and play as well as any player in the country for the final 2 months of the season. But just what did you think of Terrence Shannon? Where'd you rank that among individual seasons?
It was the best I've ever seen. I mean, there are individuals that might have endeared themselves more to Illinois fans over a career. So like D. Brown, Darren Williams, Nick Anderson, fine. Individual season, no one ever did that. And I don't know if anyone ever will. And when I look at what Terrence Shannon did, especially in that last month, what was it, 30 points a game, essentially?
Insane.
And I hate the way it ended. And in some ways I guess if I'm getting cynical, it reminded me a bit of Io versus Loyola, but UConn was not Loyola. UConn was UConn, and I'm willing to give a little bit of leeway given that
he had 7 postseason games before that were just or 6, whatever it was.
Exactly. So when I think about why did Illinois win a Big Ten tournament title, why did Illinois make an Elite Eight? Now, Marcus Damas, that's another conversation we probably don't have time to have, but I will say that was one of the most out of nowhere enjoyable individual seasons I think we'll ever see. But Terrence Shannon Jr. was a force. He was an NBA player playing college basketball. And we'll see again what happens in the court case. I think that when the news came out, I think on December 28th, I was driving back from Christmas up in Michigan, and it was a gut punch. I mean, and after we made the Sweet 16, Harry Black was working for ESPN, and he got me on their Sunday show. And I got a question about that. How have you been navigating watching this team and enjoying it with the whole Terrence Shannon Jr. case? And it was a little tricky to navigate as a fan, but just from a basketball perspective, I enjoyed the hell out of watching him. And I don't know if I've ever enjoyed watching a basketball player in a single season. So statistically the best, aesthetically, one of the most incredible things I've seen over a prolonged stretch of time. And when it came down to it and when it mattered the most in March, he was unconscious. I mean, the Big Ten tournament weekend, that's Saturday game against Nebraska. We were left for dead. If it wasn't for him, it was over. And what a disappointment that would have been. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, you have a signature moment. If he is found not guilty, if this court case doesn't implicate him in what the charges are, then that dunk is going to be on that highlight reel with Lutherhead's steal and layup against Arizona, with Nick Anderson's shot at Indiana. It's one of those. And I'm glad that at the end of a great individual season, he got that iconic moment that will be something that will be on highlight reels for years to come. So yeah, it's the best I've ever seen. And Much as I loved Io, D Brown, Darren Williams, Frank Williams, no, this was the best.
All right, give me your Marcus Demas thoughts.
How can you not love the guy? I mean, you know, it's so funny how the 1 or maybe 2 turnovers a game that he would have were always at the worst times or at the end of the first half when he needed one more shot. But man, that's the nitpick on a guy that came in and was a first team all Big Ten caliber player when I thought he was going to be a role. I think we all thought he was going to be a role guy, a starter, but maybe your 3rd leading scorer at best. And to see when he was in the zone, I mean, the Purdue game at home, he almost single-handedly helped you win that game. And I know you didn't, but that 6-0 run that he had on his own, I think scoring over Edey twice. Yeah, pretty special. And the family, it's one of those kind of like gooey, like sentimental things because the family was embraced by the fan base, all the love that was shared, it'd probably make other fan bases sick. But for us, he was our guy, if only for a year. And I think what it also proved to me is that even in the transfer portal era, I'm not going to have any issues getting to know and getting to like the players on my team. I think a concern I had was, well, we're only going to get to know them for a year. How are you going to be able to fan as hard? I don't think that'll be a problem. And a guy like Marcus Demas in 1 year had more of an impact on this program than a lot of 4-year guys.
Oh, and I can't not ask you about the Coleman Hawkins experience over the last because if we'd gotten to know somebody, it's definitely Coleman Hawkins. I have loved talking to him. He is always interesting. So for us media, he's fantastic. And he was a heck of a player, had a hell of a season, Carp, despite the injury, despite kind of playing out of position. The recruitment has already been interesting because it sounds like he's we'll see where he's going to visit now. I don't know where he's going to end up, but what have the last couple of months with Coleman Hawkins been like for you?
You know what's funny? A month before you make the Elite Eight, he single-handedly lost you the Penn State game. Kinda. And not that everyone played well, and Justin Harmon could have made the shot at the end, I think, to either win it or tie it. But regardless, Coleman, for those moments that would drive you nuts, then he turns around the next game against Iowa and dominates. But it was more the journey with Coleman that I appreciate because it was even like last year. I think it was the Las Vegas game against UCLA. He had a really bad first half. He was making me want to pull my hair out because of turnovers and just kind of seemed lackadaisical, not totally focused. But I will give Coleman this. He is truly a unique individual. And in this landscape of sports where everybody is so careful with what they say and every statement is so prepared and so cliche written, he is a dude, a living, breathing person that is not afraid to be who he is. I appreciate that for one.
He's authentic. He is so like who he is, like who you say, like, that is Coleman Hawkins. And I agree with you. We don't get to see a lot of that all the time anymore. So I always appreciate his authenticity, even if it, can rub people the wrong way at times.
Yeah. A 4-year player that won 2 Big Ten Big Ten tournament championship, Big Ten regular season championship. You could argue really 2 Big Ten regular season championships, but Juwan Howard's not there anymore. So we'll let sleeping dogs lie. He was a winner. He was a winner for 4 years, and he's the kind of guy that when he comes back, which I'm sure will happen multiple times, he will be welcomed with a standing ovation, and he will be as deserving as anyone for that. Wherever he goes, there's not going to be any of that, oh, well, why didn't he come back for a 5th year? Listen, we had to do what we had to do. He had to do what he had to do. And you saw in the tweet about him graduating and him and Brad Underwood. I think they have a fondness for each other and an appreciation for each other. And as a fan, I have an appreciation for a guy that in this portal era was a freshman to senior player who graduated from this university. He is in many ways a throwback to something that we are not going to see much more. So yeah, what a year for Coleman. And I mentioned the kamikaze jump out of from the television screen, you probably saw it developing, but on TV, it was almost comically ridiculous how he just comes completely horizontal out of the edge of the screen to try to steal that pass. And I know he didn't, but if there's one play that sums up Coleman for all his eccentricities, that's it. And I love him for it.
Yeah. All right, Carp, let's flip to football because can I just rattle off some of this? Because I wrote this up because I did a summer school with Bud Elliott at CBS Sports for their Cover 3 podcast. And it's just kind of the Brett Bielema era. Okay. They're 18-19, 12-15 in the Big Ten under Brett Bielema. That is the best first 3 years by a new head coach since Lou Tepper in 92-94. And we know Lou Tepper took over a very good program from Makovic. Ron Turner, by comparison, 11-23. Ron Zook, with a 9-4 season, Rose Bowl season, was 13-23. Tim Beckman, 12-25. Lovie Smith, 9-27. You've been competitive. Bielema has a positive point differential, plus 20 against Power 5 opponents. The previous 3 coaches, all of them, each of them, were minus 300 against Power 5 teams. 11 of the 19 losses, there's 19 losses, but 11 of those are by 1 possession. He's also had 11 draft picks the last 3 years. That's 4th most in the Big Ten, behind only Michigan, Penn State, and Ohio State. Of course, the bad Carp. 11 of your 19 losses are by 1 possession. You've missed the opportunity for probably one of the best 3-year stretches in Illinois history. And since starting 7-1 in 2022, they're 6-11. Last year, you won 5 games by 6 or fewer points. All 5 years were by 6 or fewer points, so it could have gone the wrong way. And you blew games against Wisconsin, Iowa, Northwestern, all close games, right? So you had a chance to win even more games. So I think this leads to a big year here, Carp. But I just feel like there's nuance of what this Bielema era has been, because he has raised the bar. I think he's unquestionably the best coach they have had in a long time. And you are consistently competitive. But now it's, can you take that next step from A to B to B to C? And that's what will be interesting the next couple of years. So I just want to throw that out there just to set the tone of the conversation with Illinois football. So go.
Yeah, no, he's not a bad coach. I think he's an objectively good coach. I do. There are mountains to climb at Illinois that other places coaches don't have to climb. And I think for the most part, he's navigated that well to this point. My concern, as you alluded to in the second half of, the first half are all the reasons why he's a good coach. And I think we'll be here for a while. And if it doesn't work, it won't be for a lack of time that you give him. It's just the notion that, as someone that has watched Illinois football over my, consciously at least the last 30 years, really focused on it. And the frustrating thing that happens all too often is they have the good season and then they don't capitalize and then they never quite recover. The 5-7 first season was a nice table setter for the 8-5 season. And last year, all you were really asking is just make a bowl game. And the schedule allowed for you to do that. And you blew it, if we're being honest. And you mentioned 6-11 in the last 17 games, right? It was the fact that last year, 2 years ago, we could have said that team was closer to 10-2 than they were 8-4. And I would have agreed with that, because they really were closer to a 10-win team. But last year, you could have argued that they were closer to a 3-9 season. And I think the concern to me is, recruiting could be worse, but it could be better. The Big Ten is getting bigger, as has been well documented. You're going to need to do better on the trail and in the portal. You're going to have to, I think, overachieve this year in order to get some of that mojo back and hopefully capitalize on that. And overachieving this year is like 7-5. I don't think that's a crazy thing to ask in year 4 when you have a lot of your guys in here and you still have some decent talent. But I think the biggest concern for me, Jeremy, is that the defense, with a generational talent like Johnny Newton, stunk. And I don't think there's much on that 2 deep right now that gives me hope. And I question the move, and I didn't at the time, but I do question the move now after seeing a full year of it, of promoting from within to Aaron Henry, because something was not working there the entire season. And maybe this offseason they're going to figure it out. But to see game after game, and the biggest one I got to think was Wisconsin at home. That was it. That was the one where that changes the entire complexion of the season if you win that.
Well, and Northwestern. And those were special teams errors. Like, the defense wasn't good in that one, but what were 14 points were given up on those, and like special teams against Nebraska. The Nebraska game for me was the most disappointing. Like, Purdue, that was a game. Like that was a game. Luke Altmaier fumbles in the end zone. That gives him a touchdown. But that was a game at halftime, and it fell apart in the second half, and the team imploded. But that next week against Nebraska, just didn't even show up for that one. That one I still don't understand. But obviously, you were never in that game. it's how you lost at Wisconsin and Nebraska or in the Northwestern one, but you also won improbably against Toledo and against maybe Maryland, even though I thought that was one of their best games of the year. Iowa, you're right there. I thought that was one of their better games of the year. And you just offensively, you just couldn't throw it over the defensive line for Iowa in that one and gave up one big play. So I think they are better. They are far better with Brett Bielema as their head coach, but there's just been a missed opportunity. And I think that's led to a big year here. Not in the sense that I think Brett Bielema is even close to being on the hot seat. I think that's 2 seasons away of being even a discussion, unless they go like 2-10 this year. I just don't see that happening. But like now there's more pressure on you in a kind of a retooling year to do what you said, Carp, to not only make a bowl game, but maybe surprise people. And I do think you have opportunities to do that, but you also have like 3 or 4 really, really hard games on the schedule with Penn State and Oregon and Kansas. It's not an unwinnable schedule to get to a bowl game, but there are some games I just don't feel like you have a great chance of winning. So I do think it puts pressure on Aaron Henry this year. I think that's clear, but I do think this offseason, I'm a little encouraged, Carp, because they've raised a lot of NIL, and they have shown a willingness to swim with the sharks in some of these transfer recruitments and win some of them, like Terrence Brooks, JC Davis, Cole Rusk, and Zachary Franklin. I think they're sitting in a really good spot for him. So that encourages me not only for this year, but for the long term that Illinois might actually have what it takes to compete in what is the new world order of college football.
Yeah, and I do think one thing they've done really good at, and this is kind of important, I think they're recruiting good quarterbacks. And sometimes a quarterback that's not all you need, but boy, can it cover a lot of issues otherwise.
Give me your Luke Altmaier thoughts. I am really high on him last year. It feels like, the beginning last year, growing pains in the Penn State game was an absolute disaster for him. But I feel like because of what Paddock did late, people almost forget or kind of put down what Altmaier did in that middle 6 games. I thought he was one of the better quarterbacks in the Big Ten during that stretch.
I think statistically he was. I mean, in the passing offense for Illinois last year, finished 4th in the Big Ten, 3rd or 4th. And Barry Lunny, after the Nebraska game, I was ready to get him out of town. Like, bye, get out of here. And then he finishes the year 7 straight. I thought really good games. Even Iowa, I thought you were a couple plays away, but it wasn't for lack of play calling. It was like Isaiah Williams not getting the spot. And
can I bring this up too? Like John Paddock didn't play all that well that game.
Not an act. When I was ready to second quarter against Northwestern, I was ready for Luke to get in there. No, Luke Altmaier, I'm very high on. And I do think you can't even call it an X factor because he's the quarterback. I do think that he could be the type of talent that, raises the floor a couple wins. Now, he's got a running back in Caden Fagan, and I hope that he's healthy. And if so, I think he's going to be just as good, if not better than last year. I think the wide receiving core, while not maybe complete just yet, we'll see if that guy ends up signing or not. There's enough guys there that you can still have a potent passing attack. And the offensive line, I think you can jumble that together, and hopefully they don't have the hiccups that they did early last year. I'm not worried about offense. I'm not. It's defense. And I've been harping on this, and some Illini fans have this sort of pride thing where they feel like it's cowardly to say this, but I want to throw this to you. I can't for the life of me understand why we did not buy out of the Kansas game. I do not understand that. And I'll tell you why. It's not just because of what happened last year. Okay. And it's not just because we have this terrible luck of scheduling a team a decade earlier when they suck. And then all of a sudden they're better than they've been in 5 decades.
It's amazing their record of doing that, Carp. Their record of USF. Let's go through them. Louisiana Tech was awesome. Duke is now good.
Though their coach is gone, right?
Yes, but still,
we'll see.
It's been a bad run. North Carolina, they had Trubisky and Marquise Williams, they were awesome during that stretch.
Missouri, I don't need Missouri on our schedule. I don't care about Illinois, Missouri football. We don't beat them in football. So the question I have for Josh Whitt, because he would ultimately have the power, I believe, to say, you know what, no, we're going to buy them out. We're going to go a different direction. We'll bring in Bowling Green or something. I am going to be potentially the surliest person on the planet on September 8th at 6 p.m. at Memorial Stadium, if that's the date, and if that doesn't go well. I view that game, without trying to be overly simplistic, I view that game as the difference between a 5 and a 7-win season.
I think it's a great opportunity for Illinois. Like I really do, because Kansas did lose some talent in the trenches. Of course, Illinois did too, right? But they have really talented skill players. And I feel like that's such an early test for Aaron Henry to prove it. I think it's a huge early test for that defense when you should be healthy. You should be coming off a win, right? And this is a chance against a potential top 25 opponent to create excitement. I think it's a huge game for you guys as a fan base to be told, hey, this is a team we should really invest in and be interested in. Not that they can't play well the rest of the season or make a bowl game or whatever it is. So I don't know if it's the absolute difference, but I agree with you. It's a huge opportunity for them and for them to prove that they're going to be better defensively than last year. Because for me, Carp, like I thought their biggest mistake maybe of last offseason was probably being overconfident in their ability to develop that secondary and probably overconfident in their ability to develop the offensive line. And they didn't address those positions enough. I think they fixed that this offseason. Like they went and got Terrence Brooks and also added Torrey Cox to make up for the depth. Like defensive line, they've added 3 pieces that they needed to fill the depth chart. But I think you're going to see a different kind of defensive front. I think you're going to see more Gayback as Seth Coleman, 2 defensive linemen, and an overhang linebacker. Like I think they're going to try and get their best 11 players on the field instead of just sticking to a certain scheme that they want or whatever. But I think they've done some of those things to address it. Now, can they get the most out of it? It's what I'm interested in.
Yeah, and I hope that is the case, because whatever this, and this is where I think Brian Walters may struggle at Purdue too, unless he makes some changes as well. It's crazy how quickly in college football teams adapt to whatever your thing is. Yep. 2 years ago, you go from a system that was the #1 scoring defense and essentially ran the same system last year with your amazing All-American defensive linemen, and you fell off a cliff. Now, part of that was
Purdue was behind you defensively, right? And they had they had some good players, like Nick Skirton, now at one of the SEC schools, is unbelievable. Cam Allen was an NFL defensive back, so they had some talent there, and they struggled.
Exactly. So I think that this is a season that's really going to kind of tell us, how adaptable is Brett Bielema, because as much as I like the positive aspects of Brett Bielema and feel like he is very well equipped to be the CEO of a football program, and I do think there are still kind of institutional things at Illinois football and history that he's still kind of fighting. And it may take longer, and maybe my impatience was unfair. Maybe in year 3 they go 5-7. Well, guess what? I've seen plenty worse seasons than that. Maybe I should just kind of take a step back and chill. I do think the first 5 games, though, are going to be very telling. The Kansas one's the big one because it's early enough. And as much as I hate the Thursday night game against Eastern, whatever, that's a whole other thing. You do get 2 extra days to prep for them. So that might actually be advantageous. If I'm trading a Saturday game day against Eastern Illinois, and in its place, I get those 2 extra days that help you beat Kansas the following week, fine. I'm okay with that. It's the Nebraska game, I think. If I look at the first 5, assuming you lose at Penn State, fine. But at Nebraska, that's one that I think whether you beat Kansas at home or you win at Nebraska, that could be the difference between a 5-win season or a bowl season. Those 2 games right there.
Yeah, Nebraska makes me more nervous now because Scott Frost isn't there in that role. It actually has decent line play as we saw last year. So that concerns me, but I agree. I mean, if you can start off that first 5 games with 3 wins, I think you're sitting in a great spot. Finally beat Purdue. You got to beat Purdue at some point. At some point, you got to start beating that team. Michigan, Oregon, you're probably going to lose back-to-back. Maybe you have a chance to shock the nation against Michigan at home with pomp and circumstance there. But Michigan State, Rutgers, Northwestern, you need to win at least 2 of those, right? And you hope you can win potentially 3 of those. I mean, Minnesota in that mix. So get 3 of those, you'd feel great. But I do agree that Nebraska-Kansas game, those feel huge for the season.
I do think the Michigan game will be competitive. I do. And I think that when you win a national title, fan bases are going to be pretty forgiving. They've been chasing that for almost 3 decades since Lloyd Carr was there. So now that they got it, it's kind of interesting because we have family up there. Even my brother-in-law, who's really in tune to it, he's a huge fan. he's blissfully happy right now. So the Sharon Moore hire, which I'm looking at like, what are you? You're Michigan. Go get but they didn't. I think you're looking at probably like an 8-4 team, which means they still got talent. They're still going to be good. They aren't competing for a national title. They lost way too much. So I do think that will be a game where you can hang. I think it'll be competitive. Or at Oregon, we know that's not going to happen. Why? To me, though, I think that the Purdue game, I almost don't want to go. In my life, I can't do any more of this losing to Purdue. I can't keep, what's so funny is
6 or 7 you've lost to Purdue now. It's insane.
How often do we talk on the radio show when I think I've mentioned this multiple times? I said, I don't want to be Purdue. I don't want to be them. But the problem is they own us in revenue sports. And I could go all the way back to Brian Cardinal going 9-0 against Lon Kruger in a very good era of Illinois basketball. I could go back to, I think there was a game in 1993 when Tepper had one of his good early teams. And inexplicably, they lost to Purdue. This is just
Carp, since we were juniors in high school, Purdue has won 15 of 19 against Illinois. They're 15-4 against Illinois since then.
Yeah. So I've just had about enough of that. It's funny because we're going, we have a fall break at school and we're going to Mexico the following day. And whether we tailgate or not, or whether I even go to the stupid game, it depends. It depends on our record. It depends how I'm feeling. I don't want to be in the stadium to see Ryan Walters potentially beat Illinois. I already mentioned how surly I'm going to get if Jalen Daniels is throwing left and right and they're putting up 56 points on Aaron Henry's defense. I don't know if I'll be able to control myself, but I do think overall this team is going to be fine. I think the question is, in what looks to be a tougher schedule and against some very potent offenses, I think that we can score 4 touchdowns a game. I think we can get right around that 30 mark in this college football landscape and against some of the teams we're playing. Can the defense, if they have to go out on the field with 4 minutes to go against Jalen Daniels in Kansas, can they get the stop? If it's at Nebraska and the same situation presents itself, can they keep Nebraska from going down and getting the game-winning touchdown or field goal? Until I see it, I'm going to be very, very nervous if that situation comes up.
And can you just not have the special teams errors that are just insanely bad? 6 wins for Illinois against Purdue since 1994. Insane. I wanted to ask you this because they're going to do the helmets in different jerseys every year. Like, what are your top Illinois uniform combinations? Because I've made it clear I am not a fan of the Giants copycat logo. I know it's what almost everybody of our generation grew up with. It was there for like 20 years. That does not mean it's good. But anyway, give your favorite Illinois football uniform combo.
Credit to Brett Bielema. I think the best helmet we have is right now. It's simple. It's clean. I think the uniform rebranding, I like that. I wish we could have matched more wins to it. And what's tricky about uniforms is you sort of associate the win and loss record with the uniform. So I'm hoping that this rebrand doesn't turn into just scrap it because we aren't winning any games. I personally like it. Even the vertical stripes, maybe the most controversial part, but the helmet unveiling that they did. No, I'm not a fan of the 90s all through the Rose Bowl year of the New York Giants logo. And I saw a post on one of the message boards, and I wish I could credit who said this, but they went like angrier than I usually get. They said that it was basically what they hated about those helmets was it reminded them of the Ron Gunther era, which at its worst, like Stephen Bardo said, was the University of East Central Illinois. It was small time, it was unimaginative, and we saw the dregs of football and all they could do for uniforms, which otherwise I like the simplicity of those uniforms in the 90s and 2000s. But the helmet, put a block eye on it, that's a great helmet.
Agreed. I think the Kittner one where it was like all blue, was it the white pants? If you have an orange helmet with a block eye, I love it. I'm an Illinois alum, so as you said, unimaginative, uncreative. Like, can we just be a little bit more creative or just simple? I think the best in college football is usually simple. And I know the black eye isn't exciting anybody. I know there's a crowd that wants the Chief. That's not happening. So why not have the university logo? Everyone knows that is University of Illinois. I know Indiana has their little black eye that they use as an alternate. Nobody has that like as Indiana's thing. So like for Illinois, I just think it makes sense. The stripe down the middle, I think it makes it nice as well. But like, they wore the Buckus uniforms with juice. One of those years, I think it was 2008.
It was 2008, Eastern Illinois. It was the remodeled Memorial Stadium dedication, right? And that uniform was sharp. And I do like of these 3 retro ones they're bringing back. The New York Giants one, I have a little bit nostalgia for the 2 good teams they had when they had that helmet. The number, and whether that's the direct, yeah, I think that one looks incredibly sharp. And then the one in the middle, which is before my time. I mean, maybe I was born the last couple of years they did this, but the curved Illini is a total 80s throwback. And I know for my dad and that generation that remembers 78,000 people at Memorial Stadium during the Mike White era, that conjures up a lot of nostalgia with it. So I like that they're doing that. I think that overall, they did, like I mentioned, a great job with the rebrand, and the helmets as they are right now, just keep it that way. And what I want to see is finally just stick with it. Just stick with it.
Yeah, the Beckman era was kind of a wild time of rebrand, and through the Lovey years, they're just trying to figure it out. New athletic directors, change of there, so there was a lot of change going on there. There's a little bit too much happening for me. The one alternate I would like is a Script Illini helmet or a Script Illinois helmet, probably Illini. If I were buying up a bunch of Illinois gear, the Script Illini would be my go-to, Carp. I just can't get enough of that.
Yeah, and well, one thing they haven't done, I don't know if you're referring to either, there's the Script Illinois on the basketball jerseys. That's one. But then they've introduced something the last couple of years, and football wears it more than others, and they're like, maybe not warm-ups, but they're hoodies and things. It's just Illini. It's taller Script. Reminds me of Ole Miss.
Yep.
Make that your thing. I thought when they announced the rebrand, that would be the thing, or it would be a secondary thing. I think it looks super sharp, and there's a couple T-shirts with that. I'm a uniform and logo junkie. If Illinois has had one flaw over the years, it's never been just settling on something. I like that they're settling, and all their imagery, they're doing the Script Illinois that the basketball team introduced. That's become a constant, and I love that. I think do away with whatever that font, the Mike Thomas font, just get rid of it. No one likes it. No one ever did like it. You're seeing the shield, not much of a thing anymore. Make the block eye, the Script, your thing, and keep it vintage. To me, that looks vintage, and I think a lot cooler on uniforms.
I will say Illinois basketball, they got to figure it out. Like those jerseys are the 2 best jerseys that are going in the athletic department. And when you get like Script white Illinois against Script yellow and black Iowa, that's perfection to me. Those 2 jerseys are my favorite jerseys in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I agree. And I would like to see, because if you recall during the Ray Rice, Tracy Abrams era, they introduced the white Fighting Illini 89 throwbacks. I would honestly love for our primary uniforms to be the white, blue, and orange Fighting Illini. Just keep it super simple. Have the Script as your home alternate. And yeah, I think that it gets the fan base excited for whatever little that's worth. When you see that, it does conjure up a lot of, memories of teams past and a lot of successes. I will say that even though I don't like the font that came out with the Mike Thomas era, even when Illinois wears their primary home whites or they wear their primary orange away jerseys, they could be worse. The font is rather minimal. It's not too big of a thing, but yeah, I'm with you. I go with the Script or go with the Fighting Illini one, because that, regardless of nostalgia, just looks the best.
Yeah. And burn the blues. Burn the blues.
You know what? I'm not ready to give up on the blues. I am done with hexes or superstitions. I think they actually look good. Just, it was funny because I was kind of going back into some old games and doing some writing, and a lot of great Illini games in the NCAA tournament and everything, it's blue uniforms. There's no curse of blue uniforms. So, I mean, I know fans hate it, and even I occasionally on Twitter will say blue uniforms tonight, and I get that little pit in my. The uniform color has no bearing on the outcome of the game.
Yeah. All right, Carp, before I let you go, I don't dive as much into this because it doesn't impact me, but I know it impacts fans, and sat in on kind of an informational media meeting about the new season ticket policy that they have moving forward called Illini Era. Their hope is it drops kind of the price of the entry point, but it's going to raise prices on a lot of people in some way, but there's going to be a reseating. They hope it's going to be simpler. They think it's going to be easier, but I don't know if you've had an experience with it yet, but like, what have you thought about Illinois rolling this out?
I have kind of mixed feelings about the way that the ticket office, or really the athletic department as a whole, has handled it. I'll give you one quick anecdote. Earlier this year, they raised the price for people who wanted to stay in lot 31. I thought that was in poor taste after a not so great football season. And then a few weeks later, they're like, hey, by the way, the first game's on a Thursday night at 8 o'clock against Eastern Illinois. Well, there goes the game day right there, even though we've already ended up the $500. I also understand that in this day and age, money matters probably more than ever in college sports. And I do want my program to be successful. So there's that acknowledgement that, yeah, we'll probably ante up a little bit more. I'll be interested to see, because I know with my parents who have had tickets since the late 70s, they've had some pretty good luck with their ticket office agent. And they are really good on a one-to-one level of interacting with a lot of season ticket holders. And I hope that holds with this new thing. And I don't really have a problem with it. If anything, I think that it's forward thinking and probably necessary. We'll see how they roll it out. There's probably going to be some angry people. I don't know if it's going to be quite to the level of like personal seat licenses, like Soldier Field did when they remodeled, or what they're going to try to do with whatever their stadium thing is. But I think that, listen, Josh Whitman, he's a smart guy. He knows what college sports is now. And I think, I mentioned Brad Underwood. I love that he's our head coach. I love that Josh Whitman is our athletic director. And if that means that it's going to cost a little bit more, but it also means that we're going to set Illinois revenue sports up for greater success, so be it. And but I will be skeptical to see. And that will be something to peruse message boards or Twitter when they start contacting season ticket holders. How many unhappy people are there going to be? That will be interesting.
There's going to be some unhappy people. Like whenever you reseat, whenever you change prices, because you look at the process and like you're thinking of how do you pick out which tickets you want. It is a very complicated process they've had for the last 40 years or whatever it is. So to make it simpler makes sense, but it also probably is going to, it's change, man, and change to a fan base. I'm just wondering, Carp, from your perspective, how is just going to games, the experience, how have they made the experience of being a season ticket holder, of going to games for both football and basketball?
Basketball's off the charts. That's an NBA presentation. When I go with a friend or sit with my family, the seats that they had last year were just above the 100 level, and you can feel the subwoofers like under you. So like they are pumping the music, and the video board and all the game day experience, I think, is top notch. So whoever is running the game day experience thing for basketball can't complain. And I really think football, the game day experience has been fine, but you got to win more. And it doesn't help that, you start winning more, you're not going to get more people in the stands. That just goes hand in hand. The more people you have in there, the more exciting it's going to be. But no, I think that it has made leaps and bounds from what it used to be. And I was reflecting on what the Assembly Hall back in the day, what that used to be as a game day experience. If the game wasn't good and it wasn't a sold out crowd, that could be a pretty sterile environment. I think for this day and age, I went to the Breslin Center this year, and you were up there covering that game. It was loud. I don't know. I thought that State Farm Center at its loudest is every bit, if not louder. So I wanted that to be kind of a litmus test for how are we doing it. And I thought the game day experience or the presentation was a lot better at State Farm Center than it was up at Michigan State.
Yeah, like there's some arenas that do a good job, like the game day crews, but like when it comes to environments, I think Purdue is on its own tier right now. Like just the energy of that building, the amount of students they put into there, the presentation, all of it, the renovation they did, it has been impeccable. Like I never thought somebody would pass up Bloomington. I never thought Indiana's Assembly Hall, somebody would pass that up just because the walls of sound there, Carp. It is the acoustics there, the amount of people is insane, but Purdue has taken that. But after that, like I think it's Illinois, I think it's Indiana, I think it's Michigan State. Like you're mentioning, I know Rutgers, some people love just because it's a little bit different, but I think Illinois is right in that next group of schools.
Yeah, I agree. The Purdue game this year when Damask went on that run, there are certain moments where, that place was ready to blow. And I will say, I do think there's a kind of phenomenon going on, and Purdue has been the exception to this. I do think that the way people consume games, and not to get all social media smart on you, but I really do think that if you were to compare the environment or the decibel level of what the crowd is making compared to 20 years ago, I don't think it's the same. I've had conversations with my family about this, and not trying to wax nostalgic or misremember how things were, but I remember a more kind of rabid, loud, obnoxious kind of fan base. And I know the Eric Gordon game was a crazy exception to that. I mean, that was on a different level, but really from the early 2000s to the early part of Bruce Weber, there was a natural noise coming from the crowd that was deafening at times. And that's a little bit more sporadic now. I think that's the way that people watch games. It's the way people consume them. They have plenty of other distractions. But I have noticed in those bigger moments at State Farm Center in the last few years, when there is a moment to key on, that place can still get as loud as any environment I've been in. So, and the game day experience is only helping that. I mean, the videos I look forward to, the Tom Green Unleash the Fury. It's so stupid, but it's brilliant. The Chicken McNuggets thing, which I know is making the rounds, but like all these things to keep people engaged in a game when people have so many other distractions they can be focusing on, I think is a testament to the game day staff they have going. They do a great job, I think.
Yeah, compared to like a school like Michigan that has nothing going for it here recently, even when they're good. I think Wisconsin hasn't been quite as great here recently. Nebraska, though, I haven't been there, but on TV, man, that Nebraska crowd gets into it. So, all right, Carp, anything else you want to hit on before we get out of here?
Not really. I mean, listen, life is good. If basketball is cooking, all's good. I mean, it really does take the pressure off a lot of the other sports where, I do think that this program is in a good place. This is my kind of off season before I kick it back into gear in mid-August. But I think overall there's a feeling and a sense among Illini fans that we're in good hands at the very top, which there have been many years in my life where I couldn't say that, whether that be Gunther or Mike Thomas. And then that trickles down to the people at the heads of each program, including, we haven't talked about women's basketball, but as one of the three, if you want to call it a revenue sport, even that seems to have found some stability in a way that it hasn't for a long time. So when we talk about what are the good days or what are the golden years, at least with men's basketball, you got to say this is 2019. This is a golden age, and it doesn't really show signs of stopping. And I know that between conversations with friends and family, I think the frequency of conversations about Illinois sports are every bit as much as when I was in high school, and it was at another peak. So it's an exciting time and a lot of fun to be doing a podcast and covering it and kind of these cool time capsule things as the seasons go along. And hopefully next basketball season, if it comes anywhere close to matching the last one, I mean, that's pretty good.
Catch Michael Carpenter on the 200 level. He's got his Substack going as well. YouTube channel. Check that out as well. Carp, it was good catching up with you, man.
Always, man. Take care.